Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 2 of Behind the Keyboard and User Ops. We're excited to be here. We just got back from KubeCon. Hello, Akansha. How are you doing?
I know I'm all good, all charged up for this new episode. We had been waiting for quite some time to get started with this episode. So finally, it's all in. And yeah, like KubeCon NA was really fun, like so busy. Um, 1 week gone, I couldn't really like think about like what all happened. Like there was so much all day round, so busy. Um, uh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we had so many different kinds of events going on. There was the Cloud Native Rejects that started off the,
Mhm.
pre-KubeCon festivities. Then there were the Colo events. So if any of you are familiar, there are like events like Edge Day, Kubernetes on Edge Day. There's the Cilium and
Mhm.
eBPF Day. There's the Istio Day. There's the Envoy Con, plus a few ones like the Cloud Native AI and Kubernetes Day, which means there's a lot more influence of this AI conversation into
Mhm.
the world of cloud native. And we're starting to see more and more interesting ways we can consume AI. So with that, we have a special guest joining us today who is based out of the UK, and he is here to share a lot of details about AI. I'm going to add you to the stage. Andrew, welcome. How are you doing?
Hi, well, thanks. Thanks for having me. I'm good, thanks.
So Andrew here is an expert in the space of AI. He's been playing with a lot of different technologies and most recently participated in Kong's hackathon and had a very interesting project that you came up with, right, Andrew? You can talk about that when we get to it, but we brought you on because there are some very interesting considerations in this space as enterprises begin to consume more of this technology, more AI, more LLMs, whatever. We also have to see the other side to it too, the governance. How do we capture the right model to operate in our environment so that we're not exposing ourselves to vulnerabilities? And then on top of that, right, we also have a lot of different individuals and teams out there that might be using it without our own knowledge too. So I'm going to kick it over to you. I want you to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about where you're coming from, what you've done in your career, and how you got to this space. And then I'll let you present your session.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks. Again, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here and discuss this topic with you guys. So I've basically been an engineer for almost 2 decades now. I think I've come through a sort of a traditional route of being an engineer, starting as a software developer, 20 years ago, and then working my way up, changing industries, changing technologies as the technology industry changes itself. Um, Most of my time spent in financial services. Last sort of role was working in an algorithmic trading firm. So, almost getting to the point of writing code to trade on the markets in some kind of automated fashion. So there's always been, I guess, a tinge to what we're going to talk about today with what I've been doing over the years. Um, I currently am one of the co-founders for a software consultancy here in the United Kingdom, and we work with APIs and microservices and platform in a lot of the enterprise companies here within the United Kingdom. And obviously, in the last, I guess it's been 2 years now, AI has just exploded. So where before we were discussing, around APIs and how they are going to scale and how they're going to run, how should we govern them? It's now turned to how do we now do this with AI? How can we get the benefits from AI? So we're having those conversations now with our customers where, especially the large enterprise companies, they don't know how to control it, or at least put some guardrails on it to make sure that it doesn't sort of roll out of control. And those sort of are the conversations that we're starting to have at the moment around sort of AI in the enterprise companies. I mean, a lot of the smaller companies, same thing as well. And I think everything applies. It's not just for the enterprise, what we're going to be talking about today, but I do think it is the larger organizations that are maybe feeling the pain already or are scared of it and almost don't know where to start. So
that's very cool. So tell us a little bit about, what your experience has been in the last, probably year. At the start of the year, we started to see this quick ramp up of this consumption of various LLMs. We saw how LLMs have been evolving very quickly too. And now you're in this space, like, where do you start? Where do you begin? How do you consume this in the enterprise the right way? What are your thoughts on that?
yeah, that's a good question. So I think when we've got clients that come to us with questions like that, a lot of it is around understanding what they want to be using the LLMs for. Is it going to be using proprietary information? Is it something that's internal to the company or a public facing one as well? Although you probably still want to have similar guardrails with whatever use case you use it for. I still think if it's something that's public, if you've got public customers using a service, for argument's sake, you probably want to have a lot more guardrails and restrictions on, let's say, what the chatbot can say back to the customer or whatever it is. So definitely what is important is to understand what you're going to be using it for and what benefit it's going to be giving your organization. I think costs can actually spiral out of control with this, as they have done, with cloud costs over the years. We've seen numerous articles about companies going back to on-prem away from cloud because it's cost them too much. I think similar things are going to happen here as well. So I think actually understanding what you want to use it for and how much protection your IP, if it needs to be using your information, what protection there needs to be there, and understanding that before you probably even start the projects. And I think a lot of the companies, because it's evolving so quickly, they're just jumping in with both feet, sometimes not even thinking, because they want to be the first to get it out. They want to be the first to say, hey, we've got it, it's running. And we've seen articles of companies, won't name them, but where it's backfired, and it's actually put a bad name to their brand as well. So I think it's important to not necessarily jump too quickly, but to understand what you want to do and then make sure that everything is in a controlled fashion, because it gets to the point where it's out of our control to a degree. You kind of let it go, and then the LLM or the AI bot or service goes and runs by itself, really, to a degree. I mean, so I think it's important to make sure that we're not all just jumping off the bridge, and following everyone in suit. So
Now, you bring up something that was very interesting, and it was much earlier on when you started. It was around a lot of organizations evaluating that on-premises approach and methodology. We used to do it a long time ago, and then we went to the cloud because it was it really affected the way we wanted to move into production. If we're having to wait to procure infrastructure and to stand it all up and then get it all running, and then we miss on, let's say, a simple cable, that's a detriment to that production date, right? Or even like the wrong drive type or the wrong CPU, or even like, it could be anything. Maybe the wrong set of servers showed up. You might even have a situation where the electrical aspect, right, your power needs aren't even met for the type of workloads that you're running. But we've addressed that in a lot of different ways. We've learned a lot from operating in the cloud. In fact, I'm starting to see and notice a pattern of a lot more data centers popping up again, more specifically to
Mhm.
house GPUs, to run GPU-based workloads. And that begs the question, do you see a larger movement towards running LLMs in the data center or on premises?
I think so. I think one of the aspects that it gives you is that control of the data that either it's reading or needs to gain access to. And I think as much as these larger organizations that offer these AI services, as a SaaS offering, you know, you are at their mercy to their security on whether whether there's a breach, and then your data can be lost or hacked or whatever. So I do think the move to more sort of, and not necessarily completely away from SaaS. There are, I think, situations where it makes sense to do that, but I do think that some organizations are going to want to keep that control themselves and actually make sure that from a security standpoint, everything is under their own control. And one aspect of that which I think is worth bringing up as well is the environmental impact of a lot of that's going on with AI. And I think a lot of people are maybe a little bit oblivious to actually how much water, for argument's sake, it actually takes to train an LLM, or even to just run some queries against like something like ChatGPT. So there's been some good research done recently. I think I shared a blog post about it a couple of months ago on LinkedIn. And it's actually quite astounding how much energy it's used with these and with these LLMs. And things will improve, things will get better. But I think, I don't know, in my opinion, it's something worth taking note of. And I think companies need to start making sure that they are also conscious of that in their decisions, before they just go out and buy a raft of servers with these, massive GPUs and start using them. So
That's a great answer. Akansha, any thoughts around that?
I mean, when I was in KubeCon NA, like as Andrew mentioned, everybody is like jumping on the AI train, like it's in the hype, right? And even if they are not using it like for a very great purpose, they just want to stamp AI on their banners so that everybody just gets to their booth and like ask them like, what's the AI hype? And but I'm like curious to know, like you said that it like companies are going out of control when they get like use AI. So like, is there any particular example so that I can understand it better? Of like how is it like going out of control?
So when I say out of control, it's maybe a little bit of an over exaggeration, but what I mean is, and actually is one of the topics of today, shadow AI, and the whole unsanctioned use of AI within organizations. And I think because it's so new, and at least in the beginning, things are coming into play now, but in the beginning, you could almost just use it wherever, however you wanted. I think in large organizations, anyone could do it without, the sign off from the IT company or IT division or IT ops or whatever. You think about anything these days, if you want to get something like a new VM, or you want to get even just a new namespace in your Kubernetes cluster, like that is a process in itself. Tickets, approvals, all that, especially in production, like that kind of stuff, or at least let's say 18 months ago, wasn't necessarily in place with a lot of organizations. And that's where the risk is with this sort of shadow AI. Teams are going, I think, by themselves, and some individuals, and going, I'm going to use it here and I'm going to get benefit here, but there's no tighter control across the whole organization. And when you've got companies that are global as well, that becomes more imperative as well, to make sure that it's not just, I don't know, one of their entities that are going AWOL or something like that. They probably want to make sure there's some consistency of this, some kind of consistency around the governance through all of the entities across the world as well. So, I mean, those are the larger organizations, and not all of the companies do have those issues. But I think things are coming under control a little bit better. I'm currently working with a company here in the United Kingdom, and they've it's a high street bank, and they've only just started to put together almost like their AI team, and you kind of think, like, how long stuff been around for? It's been ages, but you can't tell me that AI hasn't been used in there. Like, they haven't started AI today. Do you know what I mean? There's no way. Like, it's been around for 2 years, So what's been happening for the last 2 years? Well, people have been doing things side of desk, haven't they? And you know how good side of desk goes. Like, that's where disasters happen, So I think companies are becoming more conscious and privy to the fact that actually this needs to be almost its own department. It needs to have its own governance and controls. And if we don't do this, we're going to end up, like those other companies with a bad brand, because our whatever service has gone and done something we didn't want it to do. So
I'm glad you brought this up. I feel like we're starting to take away from your presentation.
that's okay.
But we could start that. I mean, I'd love for you to start sharing a little bit of that visual side of it as well. But one thought I had was around, you mentioned that there's this new department that's going to come up in a lot of organizations that surrounds AI. There's going to be the governance side, there's going to be the tech side, the operational side. What are some of those roles that folks can expect to see and maybe look out for if they're maybe pursuing another level of their career, the next level of their career in when it comes to AI?
Very good question. So I think there's always going to be what everything needs to run on at the end of the day. So and whether it's on-prem, whether it's cloud, whether it's a platform, so there is going to be some kind of AI platform engineer. And the reason why I think it might be slightly different is I think the AI services that we will want to be running will probably run slightly differently to the way other services are running as well. So I think that's one aspect, one role that if people are wanting to look at getting into, everything has to run on something. The other is around and I'll talk about some of the patterns a little bit later as well, but is around sort of like, how do you get the best out of your AI services? How do you get the best out of your LLMs? And it's actually becoming quite a, if you want to call it an art, that sort of prompt engineering. So how do you ensure that you're asking the prompts correctly to get back the right kind of results? And it's not always a ask once and get the answer. It's not an oracle that has all the, it's sometimes a bit of a conversation back and forth. No, you didn't get that right, I improve that, that kind of thing. So I think that sort of skill is going to be quite important. And then another one, I think lastly, would probably be which is one of the patterns I'll talk about in a second, is around how do you fine tune the responses with more relevant information, and often that's like your IP from your company. Do you know what I mean? Like, because let's say, for argument's sake, you've got legal documents in the company. You don't obviously want that out on the public web. So, but you may want your legal clerks to be able to, scanned through a million, documents or chapters to find something specific. And, so how do you then take that, break it up in a way that can be read by an LLM to give you the ability so those clerks can now get more efficient when they're trying to find the information to solve, the issues that they've got on sort of day to day. So I think those, in my mind, there might be others. I mean, in my mind, those are probably three pretty distinct roles that I see coming out in the next few years.
Yeah, I think this is like a nice little clip because it's important to start thinking about the future and where you want to go with your career. I mean, heck, I was thinking earlier on this year I wouldn't even need to touch anything AI related. I would just maybe use a little bit of that ChatGPT magic and be on my way. But no, here I am, opening up Python and sticking in, let's say, random information that leads to OpenAI, and it's fascinating, where that takes you. Anyways, I'm gonna bring up your presentation because I think there's a lot that you can share visually, and I'll let you dig right into it.
Cool. So I mean, yeah, I had some topics up there, and I think we've started exploring all of the topics already, which is absolutely fine. So, one of the things I actually wanted to share is, and it's worth talking about as well, is the impact of AI on the industry. And this came out of McKinsey. I was actually thinking about it just before this call, 2023, which actually in this day and age, a year old, is probably so far out because things change so quickly. But worth understanding that that $4.4 trillion is the expected contribution to global economy from generative AI. They're expecting it to be a large contribution to their global economy, and they reckon about 60% automation as well, or part automation of occupations as well. I think it's very dependent on what the occupation is, to be honest. There are still some which I question whether it's even going to be able to automate it all. But then I think the estimated productivity of 45% in the customer care functions, I think, and that is a lot of what I'll talk about within one of the patterns as well, on how you can actually improve on the customers getting almost better responses back from your LLM, because the LLMs will be more knowledgeable of all of the content or all of the information than some, not all, sort of operators as well. So very interesting stats that came out of McKinsey last year. So we spoke a little bit about shadow AI as well, and I just wanted to put a definition of it up there. I mean, anyone who's listening, if you didn't know what shadow AI is, it's, like I mentioned earlier, the unsanctioned use of AI within organizations. So if you know of any teams in your companies that are using it and they haven't had an approval through your standard approval process, it's probably the use of shadow AI. And I personally would stop doing it unless you've obviously got approval from your line manager or boss. But I think without some kind of control over it, it just becomes the Wild West. And I think that's a recipe for disaster, in my opinion. So yeah, that'll shadow AI. So I think I'm going to talk about this slide for a little bit longer than the others. And I think one of the things that organizations struggle with, especially at the enterprise side, is how do we put control around things? How do we, effectively set up a strategy for AI within our organization? And I think, it's become common knowledge in the last few years about enterprise API strategies, and companies talking about these strategies they have for their APIs, how they're going to use the APIs, how it's going to give them additional benefits and value within their organizations. So that's become a common theme and topic that all companies are implementing, if haven't implemented already. And I think the same thing goes with your AI strategy as well. I don't think it changes just because it's AI. I still think you need to set out an enterprise strategy across the organization, and these are just a number of sort of different topics that you would need to think about. And I think one of the big ones is probably around governance. Understanding things like guardrails, security, data protection, auditing, test automation as well. How are you going to test this before it gets rolled out into production? I think those problems haven't necessarily been solved yet, but people are just going production with all this stuff, which I think is could end up being a problem. And then around things like efficiency and resilience, I think those fall in the same camp as everything else we've been doing recently over the last sort of 10-15 years. So it has to run on something. It has to run on a platform. Well, are we observing it? Do we have the metrics and the graphs, and is there failover? Do we have high availability for what we're running?
So let me ask you, sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to ask you, what do you feel is the right platform to be able to run something like this? I mean, this model that you're presenting is a very familiar model to, I feel like, everyone, because we've seen this pattern 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So is it coming down to a platform that can support all of this or how do you view this? What is the right approach to achieving all of these different strategies or sub-strategies?
So it's a good question. I don't think, because everything's so new, and also I'm definitely not the oracle on all of it, but what I've seen and what we're doing is we're using Kubernetes as a platform to achieve a lot of this. And in one of our companies, one of our clients that we're working with at the moment, we're currently building their AI platform, their enterprise AI platform for them, and doing exactly that. So following this model and building it all out in the cloud on Kubernetes. And I think a lot of it you will get, but it's sometimes also not just what it runs on, because there's also the patterns and the thoughts around things like, well, am I completely tied into one vendor, or are we just using OpenAI? Oh, now what happens if that goes down? Does everything we run go down? You know what I mean? And some of the services will be, the LLMs may be SaaS. So you may have all of this running on your own platform and then it reaching out, and I think even if you have things running on a very scalable, resilient platform, you still need to think about, well, are we putting all our eggs into one basket? So there are strategies as well outside of what it's running on, I think, that need to be thought about as well. And there's in one of the last patterns I talk about at the end of the talk as well, hopefully we'll give a little bit more light on that as well. But I mean, I think, and then operational excellence, and then we spoke a little bit around this as well, around the whole thing about prompt engineering, and just making sure that because I think at the moment models seem to be coming and going quicker than I can even pronounce their names these days. So it's also making sure you understand how you are going to manage, as things change and as things flip and as the models change. How will you manage that within your platform? So this is just a model that we are currently using at a client. It's not necessarily the only one, and I think what will happen over the few years is it will probably flip-flop around a bit, and then we'll get to a point where everyone's running it on-prem a lot of this goes away, or everyone's gone on-prem's too expensive. We've gone back to SaaS, and then you have to manage those things yourself. So I definitely think it's a starting point. It's almost a stake in the ground, and then going, okay, well, where do we go from here? Because everything's so new at the moment, isn't it? So it's always hard to know whether this is going to be the way, but I think it's a good starting point. So yeah, so the last sort of bits I wanted to talk through was just some patterns that I've seen at current clients, and things that are worth thinking about. Hopefully it's not too small actually on the screen, but I'm going to go through 3 patterns that I think is definitely worth thinking about, and it takes into account a lot of what I was talking about in the previous slide as well. So the first one is probably quite an obvious one, but it's the AI proxy. And why this is important is you effectively want the ability to be able to call multiple different LLMs. So don't be dependent on a single one, but every single LLM will probably authenticate differently. They may want different headers. They may want their prompts in different structures. So what you don't want to do is write something for every single LLM. And that's effectively what this is, like a standard proxy works, and as it always has for the last however long. So, effectively gives you the ability to, transform your request or your response. You can decorate it if you need to add any additional information to it. Any authentication you have for it, it will do it, whether it's OIDC or KeyAuth, whatever that is, and then being able to send to whichever LLM it needs to go to. And that's whether it's cloud or on-prem as well. So it opens that up, and then if you build this, all of your downstream systems then don't need to worry about, when you pull one of these guys out, or one of them goes down, or you add a new on-prem LLM, you can just add it in, and it can all be managed within your AI proxy. So one really powerful pattern. And if you're looking to start with something today, I would recommend this AI proxy as a good starting point, definitely. Next is called LLM as a judge. And this is an interesting pattern. And I don't necessarily think there is the how am I going to say that?
I like that
really,
name, LLM as a judge.
yeah. It's so let me explain the pattern, and then I'll talk about what I was actually trying to say.
Okay.
But basically what it is it's using an LLM to judge the response from other LLMs. So in a way, it's just making sure, and you can see by this, you basically send your prompts to your LLMs, and then you send it to the judge, and you say, this is what I gave as my inputs. This is what I got as my outputs. What do you think about the response? And it's a really good way, because the judge can be a really fast LLM. You can get ones that are super quick. So it's not necessarily going to add too much more latency to what you're already doing. But it gives you the ability to, rather than as a human going, okay, well, we're going to have to check every single response that comes out of these large language models before we allow for it. The idea here is that let's rather use the LLMs themselves. Not obviously the ones at the bottom aren't the ones that are used as a judge, but let's get them to basically mark their own homework. So that's kind of the idea behind it. And I think because it will get to a point where there's so much going through these large language models that it will become too much work for a human to be able to check the responses and check what's coming in and going out. So it's a pattern that we've only just started looking into at one of our clients. So I don't have any real world data to say, yes, this is the way to go, but just a really interesting pattern that I wanted to bring up and talk about today. Cool. And then the last one, the last pattern is a vendor agnostic RAG pattern. So
what is RAG? I mean, I've heard the term so many times. I have a loose understanding of it. Tell us a little bit more.
yeah, definitely. Yeah. So for those that don't understand or don't know what it is, so RAG stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation, and it effectively is a technique that is used to improve the accuracy of your large language models. And how does that work? Well, effectively, if you wanted your large language models to have all the information about your company, for argument's sake, so like I was talking earlier about those legal documents, you would probably have to take a large language model, train it yourself with all your documentation, all of your information, and then use that. But actually, that's not practical these days. It's not only takes a very long time to train up LLMs, but it is also very costly as well. So what RAG allows you to do is effectively allows large language models to reach out to external sources to get data. And it's that additional data coming from the external sources that improves the accuracy of the large language model. A good example of this is something like a vector database. So I'm sure everyone's been hearing about vector databases these days. And what you end up doing, I mean, it's quite an involved process, but you effectively take your documents and you chunk them up into particular sizes, which are sort of efficient for LLMs to search. And then you insert them with embeddings into a vector database, and it allows the LLMs to actually read the database and obtain the information that it needs to return the response to the prompt that they have. Now, there's a lot more to that. I think I went very high level exactly how it works, but as a high level premise, that's effectively what RAG gives you. So all sounds great, all sounds really good, and you think, lovely, but again, what you need to be careful of, and that's what this pattern hopefully will help with, is don't get locked into a single vendor. So you may want a different LLM that you want to talk to. Well, depending on which LLM you're using, it may only have access to their own sort of AI storage capability, and some of the big cloud vendors, they do exactly that. They almost force you to a degree to use theirs. So what this pattern gives you is you effectively build out some kind of inference API, which will reach out to whichever sort of storage, external storage you're using, whether it's a vector database or a SaaS service or something like that. It'll get the most, sort of top ranking documents, and then it'll pass that with the prompt along to the LLM of choice. And again, you can then use any LLM. You can go with OpenAI, you can go with your own on-prem. It's up to you then. So this kind of abstraction away means you can start opening up to not only not getting vendor lock-in, but also that whole thing I was talking about with failover and resilience and all of that. All of these patterns start now, hopefully showing what I was talking about on the enterprise side, what you need to start thinking about. These patterns will start helping, I guess, resolve a lot of those issues that you need to have in place in your strategy for AI within your organization.
So a lot of these patterns, like with respect to load balancing, achieving availability, this is stuff we still do, like regardless of whether we have models running in the environment, in the data center, or even in the cloud. But what are some ways or some technologies that allow us to achieve that high availability, or that very intelligent routing, or being able to use that that response or request transformer style capability?
So the first one that springs to mind will probably be Kong's AI gateway, and they are probably one of the first that came that I've seen that came to market with a whole raft of open source AI plugins, where you actually get a lot of this sort of out of the box, especially with things like AI proxy. That was one of the ones that that is there and I have used before. Is really, really great. And there's a whole raft more of plugins that have come out after that. So they're not going to be the only gateway that comes out with these kinds of capabilities. But I think the majority of your API gateways that you are using within your organizations, they will most probably have some kind of AI capability and policies coming, if not already released.
So, like, what's the most common pattern, like, out of these three, which is like majorly used?
I think, excuse me, I think the most common pattern is probably AI proxy, 100%. And that's just because, you've got companies where they may want to be looking at multiple LLMs and having that sort of abstracted away. But I think RAG is becoming one of those topics that everyone is talking about. So whether companies are doing a vendor agnostic RAG or not, they may just be going, we're all in Azure for argument's sake. A whole company's in Azure, doesn't really matter. We're just going to go all eggs in there, and that's fine as well if that's your strategy, So, but those are definitely, are definitely the most common by far. So. Cool. So the other thing worth noting as well, if you're happy to move on, is just to talk about the plugin that I wrote for the hackathon, and we can jump into that and just kind of talk about that a little bit as well.
I'd love to see that. And plugins are interesting because it allows you to create your own custom approach to doing something with an API gateway, right? You're adding your own custom logic. And in your case, did you write on top of an existing plugin, or how did that all work out?
Yeah, exactly. So, the one really great thing, like you said, about these plugins or policies, depending on the gateway that you're using, is that you can extend the capabilities of what's already there very easily yourself. When I built this AI plugin this year, I didn't build on anything else. I actually started from scratch. Although there are already some AI plugins, and there were parts of what I did, which are, I guess, in a way solved in some of the other plugins. I think the pattern that they are looking to go to at Kongs, is speaking to some of the engineers there, is moving everything into the SDK. So allowing customers to, rather than, because otherwise what ends up happening is they're great for building blocks, but you also don't want to have 100 building blocks to do one thing. Sometimes, you can squash that into one, and especially when speed and efficiency becomes quite important, I built this plugin. The idea behind it was actually to implement a wiretap pattern. This is a very well-known enterprise integration pattern, and the idea here is effectively, you've got data coming from a source to a destination, and as it goes through, like a wiretap. You think about, the police on the phone or whatever, listening in without you realizing, and the message gets sort of taken off the wire and then taken somewhere else to do sort of something else with the information. So that's kind of the idea around that I got to for the plugin. So some sort of use cases for it, because otherwise it's a bit like, oh, why would you do that? So monitoring, if you want to be monitoring messages that are coming through and doing something with those, that could be quite important. Auditing, you may want to be pushing, the data somewhere else for some sort of auditing purposes, maybe even some logic around it. Only if the information is X do I want to send it, otherwise just ignore it, and then some kind of troubleshooting as well. I think troubleshooting is always one of those topics that can be improved on. So anything that we can add to make it even better and easier to find problems, I think is always good. So this is effectively what it looked like. The plugin was an AI sentiment wiretap plugin, and effectively what it did was it took the request that came in and it sent it to OpenAI to get the sentiment of the text that was given. And then based on that sentiment, it then created a Jira ticket and set the priority depending on the sentiment. And that's effectively what it was. And the idea here, I think I talk about it in here, the real world. The idea effectively is, if it's a negative sentiment, then let's set it to a high priority. And then maybe you've got a team, a customer service team that wants to contact the customer to find out, what went wrong, how can we help you, that kind of better customer service experience. That was kind of the idea behind this particular use case. So yeah, like I said, real world use case, monitoring and troubleshooting. Send a message to OpenAI, calculate the sentiment of the text, create a Jira ticket, set the priority, which is what I've just mentioned. So, and yeah, real world. So the one I was using when I did this was, a review of a product. So someone sends a review of a product, they don't like the product, or something went wrong, and then 5 minutes later their phone rings and it's customer service going, oh, we hear you didn't like the product, can we help solve that for you? That kind of idea. I mean, you could probably extend this to a million other things as well, but that was as a hackathon, you know what they like. It's sort of quick and dirty, get something done, and sort of get it out there. But yeah, it worked really well, and I was really happy with the result.
Oh, that's fantastic. The cool thing about hackathons is, like, you've got an idea and it's not really about developing that plugin. It's more about getting the plugin to work, an MVP, if you will, right? Getting it out the door, ship it kind of mentality. So I really appreciate hackathons. I know Kunal entered the chat somewhere, and I know he's been running hackathons too. So I'm looking forward to those and seeing a lot more of those. I think he might be running one in the London area at some point. If he is, I'll let you know.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, they are fun though as well. I think that's the thing. You get to maybe do stuff that's not necessarily what you do every day.
Exactly.
Sort of, yeah. So I definitely enjoy that. Yeah.
I kind of need to create my own plugin that'll do my Jira tickets for me, so I don't have to sit there and type them all out.
Absolutely. I'll send you the link. You can share my code and use that.
Fantastic. All right. Well, I think that brings us to the end of our stream. But just to summarize, we did cover a lot of very cool ideas and ideology, and how you've handled shadow AI and enterprise AI patterns as well. And you really shared a lot of what people are doing today. I think that's important, because as organizations are really scoping out their plan for 2025 and understanding how they're going to onboard this AI strategy, this is a good resource. Come back and take a look at this video, start from the very beginning, and you'll see a lot of the great stuff Andrew shared around his approaches, around the ways shadow AI might burn us in the future, right? Especially when it comes to outages. Oh, wait, that one little thing that we were doing, that API call that we were creating and sending out was to an LLM that we had no idea about, that some developer created.
Mhm.
We don't want that dependency situation, right? That's what we try to avoid. So, Andrew, I want to say thank you so much for coming by and sharing a lot of your knowledge, your wealth of knowledge around AI. Akansha, did you have something you wanted to add?
No, I mean, I certainly learned a lot. Like, I was not aware about like shadow AI, to be honest. So when you told me that this is something you want to cover, I looked up like, okay, this is interesting. And then all the business use cases which goes around in the companies, it's great to know. Like, this is something which I was not aware, and it's not something which is spoken about like so in general. So thank you so much. Like, I really appreciate your time and uh, your knowledge you shared over the stream.
No, it's a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. It's been great. It's been great to chat to you guys.
Andrew, one last question. If folks want to find you, what's the best way they can get in touch with you and connect with you?
I think best way is probably via LinkedIn. Yeah. So if you search me on LinkedIn, you'll definitely find me. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, everyone, we will be back with another episode of Behind the Keyboard and User Ops very soon. Stay tuned. Until then, look forward to our stream around KubeCon, a KubeCon recap. We'll be sharing that very soon as well. We're looking forward to it because there's a lot we learned. So we want to share that with the community, and we hope you enjoy. Have a great day, everyone. Akansha, Andrew, thank you so much for your time and for being here. We will see you soon. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.